Well, our deadline is coming up right now in a couple of days, and I think you've just heard a lot of chatter about, what we're asking for is not sustainable for the business.
Such losses would jeopardize the league's financial health, the source said, and they would be more than the combined losses of the league and its teams in the WNBA's first 29 years of existence. That's wild.
That handout money goes away and this thing collapses. Let's be for
Caitlin Clark keeps breaking records, and at the same time, the CBA negotiations have just taken another turn that feels like a full-on power struggle. But the more chaotic these talks get, the more it looks like the players are quietly admitting something they don't want to say out loud. Nobody's framing it this way, so stay with me and tell me if you agree. Let's start with the CBA. The players put forward another proposal, and the headlines coming off it are the kind that make casual fans do a double take. If you take the numbers being floated at face value, the league is warning it could create a massive financial hole over the next few years. And that is the part that should stop everyone in their tracks.
Familiar with the negotiations, told ESPN on Wednesday that the WNBA is projecting that a recent proposal from the WNBA, which would give players about 30% of gross revenue, is believed to feature approximately a $10.5 million salary cap, would result in $700 million in losses over the course of the agreement. Such losses would jeopardize the league's financial health, the source said, and they would be more than the combined losses of the league and its teams in the WNBA's first 29 years of existence. That's
because when you hear a figure like hundreds of millions in losses, that's not just a negotiation tactic. That's a stress test on the entire business, especially when the league side is already talking about major salary increases plus some form of profit sharing that, of course, the players are pushing back hard on the league's framing. Nafisa Collier, a vice president with the WNBA Players Association, addressed it directly, and the reaction online was immediate. Fans didn't just disagree, they went straight into roast mode because people are hearing one message from the league and a totally different message from the player side. Now, here's where it connects back to Caitlin Clark. While all this is happening, there's also been a lot of talk about Unrivaled and whether it's a real long-term alternative or just a leverage play in the middle of negotiations. Calling any new league sustainable in its early stages is always a premature victory lap, especially when the audience and revenue picture are still developing. And if the reporting is accurate, there are real questions behind the scenes, from roster stability to whether partnerships become necessary to keep the business model solid. When you zoom out, this starts to look less like pure labor posturing and more like a bigger admission. The league's growth is real, but the center of gravity is obvious. The biggest draw, the biggest attention magnet, the player who changes the math when she's on the screen, is Caitlin Clark. And that reality is sitting underneath every one of these negotiations, whether anyone wants to say it or not. Feeling certainty about her alternative model sounds confident on a microphone, but confidence isn't the same thing as proof. What jumped out to me isn't even the business claim, it's the subtext. She's taking a shot at Kathy Engelbert, basically arguing that WNBA leadership has fumbled the moment. Maybe that's fair. Maybe it isn't. But the comparison people keep making is off.
Well, our deadline is coming up right now in a couple of days, and I think you've just heard a lot of chatter about, what we're asking for is not sustainable for the business. And being on this side with Unrivaled, I know what it takes to run a sustainable business. So I think if they can't find a model that makes it happen, they need to put people in place who can, because we've proven that it is possible. There is a way, and we're thriving in that. And so I do think a deal is going to get done, but we're standing firm in what we believe in. We're not going to back down, and we can't take less. The sport has just grown too much. It would be a disservice to the people who came before us, so the work that we put in to take less.
Running a small, centralized product with one venue and a controlled environment isn't the same job as running a national league across multiple markets, owners, arenas, travel schedules, media windows, and local revenue realities. Those are different animals with different constraints. And here's what nobody wants to say plainly. This entire negotiation climate doesn't exist at this intensity without Caitlin Clark reshaping the attention economy around women's basketball. It's the middle of the off-season, and she's still the gravity point. The brand indicators alone tell the story. Nike is building an actual moment around her signature rollout. Her player-exclusive sneaker moment has spilled into NBA culture. The collectible market just validated her again with a record-setting sale that put women's sports cards back into the mainstream conversation alongside names like Serena Williams. And fans say, take the deal and keep the momentum going. That's logical from the outside, but the players may be operating off a colder assumption.
TNT is taking massive losses for this thing to pretend like they're a successful league. As soon as TNT has to start crediting back advertisers, that handout money goes away and this thing collapses. Let's be for real.
They may believe the Clark-driven surge is powerful, but not permanent, and definitely not something they can safely bet their next CBA on. They saw what the metrics looked like when she wasn't in the mix. Attention softens fast. Gate interest cools. Conversation moves on. If you're negotiating for the next several years of your career, you don't build your leverage around one superstar staying healthy forever. One major injury swings the entire leverage landscape, and the next round of talks becomes a different fight. Meanwhile, ownership has expansion pressure and valuation pressure. New markets like Toronto and Portland don't get sold on theory. They get sold on stars, storylines, and must-watch TV. Timing matters, too, because a signature shoe launch right before tip-off is the kind of marketing window you don't want to waste. That's why I think the players are pushing like it's now or never. Not because they hate growth, but because they know this exact leverage stack may never be this strong again. And I'll add one more uncomfortable angle. If the league hasn't made protecting stars a priority through officiating and enforcement, then the team that benefits most from Caitlyn staying upright has to treat roster building like security. Indiana Fever fans get what I mean. And yes, that includes keeping a player like Sophie Cunningham in the picture. That's my read. The aggressive posture isn't just about money. It's about fear of the window closing and an unspoken acknowledgement that the league's current trajectory is riding on one engine more than anyone wants to admit. There's a reason this negotiation feels more like a staring contest than a normal labor discussion. Both sides know the league is standing at a rare inflection point. The players see attention, leverage, and outside options. The owners see expansion fees, rising valuations, and a public narrative that the league is finally turning the corner. That combination creates urgency, but it also creates fear, because urgency makes people overplay their hand. Here's the tension. The players want a deal that reflects the league's future, not the league's past. They're tired of being paid like the product is niche when the product is increasingly mainstream. They also know that waiting for profitability can become a moving target, especially in a sports business where accounting choices can make a season look better or worse depending on what we're trying to prove, but ownership has a different anxiety. They want labor certainty before they lock in new sponsorship packages, renew media commitments, and make big bets in new markets. Expansion isn't just about adding teams. It's about adding infrastructure, staffing, travel, arenas, marketing, and long-term commitments, all of which are easier to justify when the league can promise stability. This is why Caitlin Clark sits in the middle of everything without being in the room. When one player can swing